Hello everyone, welcome to the session. Today our topic is liquid rockets and hybrid rockets coming under the course Fundamentals of Aeronautics and Astronautics. I am Manikandan, working of Assistant Professor in the Department of Aeronautical, Bharat Institute of Higher Education and Research, Chennai. So basically, liquid propellant rockets are actually rocket engines which uses propellants in the form of liquid. You say today whatever the rockets which we use are normally liquid propellant rockets only. So we can basically say rockets means liquid propellant rockets today. Even though we used solid propellant rockets previously due to their simplicity in design and construction, it is very simple actually, which we have discussed in previous lectures also. But the problem is once if you start the engine, it's highly difficult to control it. Even thrust control anything, it's not easy to control. So it can be used as a booster, but it cannot be used as a main engine. Maybe initial thrust, if you want, you can use solid propellant rockets or solid boosters. But liquid propellant rockets are the major, or we can say majorly used rocket engines today. Because what liquid propellant engine comprises of uh, so many basic components, and mostly the thrust could be controlled by using the change in the propellant flow with ratio. So we can change the propellant flow ratio, and we can easily control the thrust we can obtain. So that is the advantage we have with the liquid propellant rockets. So there are two types of liquid propellant rocket, liquid propellants usually. So monopropellants and bipropellants. So monopropellants don't use a separate you don't need to have two separate we can say tanks, for one for oxidizer and one for fuel. It can be stored in a single tank and will remain stable. So um, the point is it's already a compound, it's already a pre-mixtured compound. They are decomposed, releasing energy in the presence of catalyst. So normally we use a catalyst to increase the rate of the reaction, and we don't require two different uh, tanks to store. For example, if you use hydrogen peroxide and hydrazine, it can be combined together and used as a monopropellant. So the point is, um, you don't require separate tanks, because if you go for long range applications, you need to carry a very huge tank, or we can say a lot of propellants are required. And if you carry two big tanks, then there will not be any space for your payload, and this will be a huge trouble. So that's why, for example, hydrogen peroxide H2O2 is used as a propellant for the turbo pumps in RD-107 and 108 engines, and in the first stage and second stages of Soyuz launch vehicles. Now, of course, it takes some time to decompose itself, so it cannot be held for years. We can't store it for a long time because it will, it will be much more dangerous. That's why it cannot be used in spacecraft for long time. So you can't use it for long times, right? Even though it hold an advantage of saving one tank, separate tank, but still, as I said, it cannot be used for a long time. Hydrazine is actually used in maneuvering thrusters, sometimes even in main engines also. So you do have a separate thruster which will control the position of the rocket. For example, if you want to go for thrust vector control, now I want to go for thrust vector control, I need to go for a small thrusters. Now that thruster will be actually propelled by a monopropellant. Now monopropellant, um, of course, we used hydrogen for Voyager and Viking, and even Phoenix Martin landing probes, etc. Because hydrogen is stable and maybe hold for years. It is very stable. It will not easily decompose, unlike hydrogen. So we use, unlike hydrogen peroxide, we can use hydrogen for a long time. It can be used as a monopropellant. Now, next we'll go for the main advantage of the monopropellant. The main advantage of the monopropellant is that, as we mentioned, we don't require separate tanks. It requires only one tank. So obviously, it's a big advantage. And due to low temperatures in thrust chamber, they may work for a long time if it is stored for a long time. and that makes them ideal for thrusters. Thrusters, it's very very important. You use monopropellants highly in thrusters. So thrusters may vary from 10 of grams to several kilograms also. So the thrust, which is measured in kilograms also, so that can be very very crucial. Now, but the problem with this particular monopropellant is that it will have low specific impulse. Now, what is specific impulse? Specific impulse is nothing but the ratio of uh, thrust produced to the weight flow of propellant. So suppose if you take an automobile, the performance of the automobile is measured in terms of mileage. Same way, if it is a jet engine, you mean in a normal engine, you term it as specific fuel consumption. So specific fuel consumption is less, that means the engine is good. Same way, when it comes for rockets or high-speed vehicles, we normally say the performance in terms of specific impulse. Now, here the biggest worry with this particular monopropellant is that even if you take hydrogen or hydrogen peroxide, the biggest worry is that the specific impulse is very very less compared to the bipropellants. That's why this is not used as a long range, or we can say a high profile application propellant, right? Now we'll go for the bipropellants. Bipropellants consist of pure and oxidizer that should be held separately. That's the point here. That should be held separately means we should store it separately in separate tanks. Of course, once if you mix it and ignite, it will be ignited. Suppose if it is hypergolic, it don't require a igniter, so it automatically uh, will get ignited. Of course, um, we do classify bipropellant into two, that is hypergolic and cryogenic. Um, of course, cryogenic can be, cryogenic can be hypergolic sometimes. No, hypergolic is a very interesting and very very useful propellant type because hypergolic ignites spontaneously when brought in contact. So you don't need to have a separate igniter. That's the main point here. You don't have to use a separate ignition apparatus or ignition component to generate the ignition and combustion. Now, once if you mix this both, once if both are in contact, not automatically it will get ignited. So you don't require a very complex ignition system and all. So of course, multiple restarts are simply feasible because you don't need to have a separate ignition. It's the most important part. The process of combustion of hypergolic propellants is also more stable, so that it looks very simple, unlike other any other type of propellant which requires igniter separately. So the hard starts are very less. You know what you mean by hard starts? That's why I mentioned this very clearly. Hard start is very very dangerous. The delay which you take are excessive. We can say when ignition in the test chamber takes place in the presence of excessive concentration of propellants, thus instantaneous overpressure is established. No, hard start is something which is very very dangerous. Like hard start means tough start. Sometimes when you take an airplane, when you take a bike also, after a very cold climate, it will take some time to start. Even if you kick it, even if you whatever it may be, it will take some time. The delayed start, that delay will actually be very dangerous, because if you don't start it on time, then the concentration of the propellants automatically they will get accumulated, and that will, and if you give a if you give a start there, if you give ignition there, there are chances of initial blast or the excessive explosion. That may be a destruction. So that may be very very catastrophic. So that's why hard starts are not appreciated when it comes to rockets. I repeat once again, hard starts means a delayed start due to some reason. Okay, so but in case of hyperbolic propellants, very very less it is, because you don't require a separate ignition system. You don't need any separate ignition system. So automatically when it comes in contact, they will get ignited. So there is very literally very less chances of uh, hard starts, right? So the right, the most widely used hyperbolic propellants are the mixture of hydrogen, such as monomethyl hydrogen, that is MMH, and unsymmetrical dimethyl hydrogen, that is UDMH, or aerosine, that is 50% hydrogen and 50% the UDMH, that is unsymmetrical dimethyl hydrogen. So they will be used as a fuel, and dinitrogen tetroxide, that is N2O4, will be used as oxidizer. So this combination is what we use as a hypergolic propellants. Hypergolic propellants means I have already mentioned you, when you mix this hydrogen and the dinitrogen tetroxide, you automatically will have the chances of ignition without any usage of a ignition chamber. Now, the biggest advantage of this particular combination is that both of the liquids can be stored at very normal conditions, and they are not cryogenic. Cryogenic need to be stored at very low temperatures. So these combinations can be very useful because it can be used as a it can be stored in very normal temperatures, and more importantly, this is very ideal for military applications. For example, intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBM, which is also coming under rockets, I mean missiles. They also use this particular hyperbolic propellants, as well as many spacecrafts applications for lifelong, I mean, like very long interplanetary probes. We use hyperbolic propellants only. Now, the furthermore advantage, the very significant advantage is that it have very high specific impulse compared to the monopropellants. And more importantly, you see this values, that is 300 to 320 and even more, which is actually considered very good as a specific impulse, although they need more complex engines when compared to monopropellant, which don't require any complexity. It's very simple, but still it is, because you always need to see this specific impulse more than anything. Specific impulse contributes a lot. That's why even though the engines are complex to make, but still it is more beneficiary and can be used for long range applications also. Generally, the flame of hyperbolic propellant is colorless and you can say slightly blue, and the plumes, that is the exhaust, the dark exhaust coming out of this particular engines, are nearly invisible. That's what you want. You don't want to have a high smoky exhaust which will be very polluting the environment. And right, this especially if it is used as a missile, you don't need to have a track. You should not be visible, you should not be visible. So that's why we can prefer this hypergolic propellant, that is the combination of the hydrogen with dinitrogen tetroxide as a hypergolic propellant. Now, um, with that, we'll move on to the cryogenic propellants. Now, cryogenic propellant includes mixture of at least one component of which either it can be fuel or oxidizer at very low temperatures. That's why it's like it should be maintained at very low temperatures. That's the point here, because this is the most energetic propellant. Most energetic means it can give you a very high level of specific impulse, and if you can give more specific impulse, that means you are giving more thrust to weight flow propellant. With less amount of propellant, you can give more thrust. That's what you want. You don't need to carry a huge amount of we can say propellants. You need to carry very less amount of propellants, but we need to go long, or we need to produce a high level of thrust. That's what you need. That's why you use cryogenic propellant. But the problem is that it's not a problem, but the significance is that either fuel or even oxidizer, or sometimes both, should be maintained at very low temperatures to liquefy, because they are generally gases, but we need to liquefy means it should be maintained at very low temperatures. Now, for example, one of the most common mixture is that liquid oxygen and kerosene, and not the kerosene which we use, the special kind of kerosene, that is US RP1, which is a very popular type of kerosene which is used in US, and in USSR, that is Russia, they use Synten. So these are the two varieties of kerosene available in two different countries. And at the end of this particular topic, I also will tell you how India have entered into this cryogenic category. India have entered into cryogenic category in 2012. Before that, India was not actually a primary member of cryogenic propellants. We were denied using cryogenic propellants for so many reasons. But cryogenic propellants have huge amount of benefits that we'll discuss. Anyway, so one of the most commonly used oxidizer is liquid oxidizer, which can boil at minus, I mean, it can boil at 183 degrees Celsius, So it can be a moderately cryogenic, and which is produced in industrial quantity, so that they does not liquefy and cold walls. So that's the most important thing. So for kerosene, the specific impulse at the vacuum, specific impulse is 340 seconds, and it is the most widely used propellants today in launch vehicles. Very few countries uses cryogenic propellants. Not every country is using cryogenic propellants. As I mentioned earlier, India used cryogenic propellants only by 2012. Before that, we were not using this, but US and USSR and other countries, they started using this cryogenic propellants. They got very huge benefits out of it before that itself. Now, the very important advantage is that if we use liquid oxidizer with liquid hydrogen, which is very rare and very costly, it can give you specific impulse of about 450 seconds, which is a top class. 450 seconds is not a joke. 450 seconds is a huge thing, which you can say that's the highest point of the rocket propulsion. So if you combine liquid oxidizer and liquid hydrogen, it can give you up to 450 seconds. Now, this is only one full cryogenic launch vehicle, that is Delta 4. The plumes are, of course, liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen will be very almost invisible. And right, so these are some examples of what cryogenic propellant can do, how significant it is. Now, we'll move on to the propellant feed systems of the liquid propellant rockets. Now, we should know one thing, that liquids will not simply come into the thrust chamber like a gravity feed fuel system in an airplane, because there is no, literally the gravity factor is very less. So that means it requires something to push the fuel and oxidizer, that is propellant, from the tank to the engine thrust chamber. So what is thrust chamber? Thrust chamber is actually a combination of the combustion chamber with the nozzle. Okay, that's what thrust chamber is. In case of rockets, which is traveling like this, it is traveling at very different altitudes. That's why it requires a feed system to push the fuel and oxidizer from the tank to the engine. Otherwise, it will not come automatically like a normal bike or even an airplane, because rocket travels at very different altitude, various altitude with respect to time, with respect to seconds. Within minutes, can travel at very different altitudes, and it requires a special system to push the propellant from tank to the thrust chamber. And of course, as I said earlier, it is against the gravity. So gravity is something which will nullify the chances of the, okay, if you have more gravity, the fuel will come down easily. But here we are against the gravity, so automatically um, the gravity factor is nil. So, and of course, it have high chance of ice formation. Usually, the fuel itself is very chilly, very cold. And if you go at very high altitudes, there is no temperature at all. So automatically, there are chances that the formation of ice is high. That's why you need to have something to push it forward from the tank, or we can say storage reservoir, to the thrust chamber. Right now, especially this particular liquid rockets are feed systems are of two types, that is gas pressure feed and turbo pump feed. Now we'll see individually in a very short manner. Gas pressure feed is the, it's not commonly used anyway. It's used only for smaller applications, but it uses high pressure gas to to displace the propellants from its tank um, through lines into the combustion chamber. Of course, it is used in a very lower performance feed system like missiles also we can use. It's not used in a very high long range applications. Now, here we use inert gas as a pushing, or we can say gas pressure, pressurized gas, so that it will push the, there are two ways. We can push the fluid from the top, or we can pull it from the bottom. This particular system is using a pushing mechanism. So it can be usually turned on and off by using actuating valves, of course, because a very old method of fluid propellant feed system. Now we'll see the picture. When you see the picture, you can clearly understand that um, this particular tank, that is the high pressure high pressure gas supply tank, that is the tank which uses, which has a high pressurized, we can say the inert gases, normally helium, right? So from there you will open the pressurized gas. That gas will go through the check valves. I will tell you, check valves actually will allow the fluid in one direction, unidirectional only. It cannot come back. Now, that particular amount which we are pressurizing will be controlled by means of the high pressure gas valve, which can be controlled from the ground. We cannot control this particular uh, because rocket is flying. We have to control it from the ground only. Now when we control it, that amount of gas will be going, and pressure regulator will regulate the pressure, and of course by means of pressure gauge we can find how much pressure is given to that. Now that goes to the individual tanks, that will give you a push. That push will push the fuel which is on the this side, I mean the other side. Now other side we have oxidizer tank that will push that particular propellants down, and we do have filters. Of course there should not be any contamination. The filters it and goes to the propellant valves. That also is remotely controlled because we will not use the same amount of fuel and same amount of oxidizer. We do have a ratio. That ratio is actually controlled by you. We have fuel and oxidizer ratio, that is rich ratio, lean ratio, that is there. So that is controlled from the ground using remote control. Then in rocket thrust chamber, it is mixed and burnt. So that produces a hot gas. Suppose if you want additional chamber, we can use it. So this is the process behind the operation of uh, gas pressure feed system. Now, the points we need to remember is that helium is used as a, yeah, pressurized gas, and of course the pressure is limited to 10 bar. More than that, it will not. The larger is the tank, the thicker should be the wall. Otherwise, when you have more pressure, there are chances that it may get blasted. And we use this in Delta 2 and Apollo SM. But the biggest problem is that um, with respect to time, the gas pressure will get reduced. Say if you use 10 bar at the initial stages, it will get reduced to 5 4, and the performance will get reduced. That's why you cannot use it for a long time. Now the point is that now second type is turbo pump feed system. Why? Because when we see the gas pressure feed, when we use it for longer applications, the pressure is getting reduced. But for longer applications, still you need to get uniform pressurization, means we must go for a separate system that is called turbo pump feed system. Since the thrust is proportional to the quantity of propellants, of course, the bigger thrust is obtained by increasing the amount of propellants, right? So if you have a very big tank, it is required to have a highly pressurization technique. And also, if you use a very thick, you can say very thick cylinder, that will be very tough. Because it itself will occupy a lot, and it will be more heavy also. That's why we need to go for a separate pump. The pump can solve the problem. It can give you a continuous pressurization also. So this is the working of the turbo pump feed fuel system. Now, turbo pump feed, here we use a separate turbo assembly, that is actually a combination of pump and the turbine mechanism. So pump and turbine is combined. So initially you do have a pre pressurization. Normally we don't fill this fuel and oxidizer in a complete fully. So you do have a small initial pressurization. So initially we open the valves here, the valves of the individual valves, and we take 1 to 5% of the propellant main flow, and we use a separate component called gas generator. So gas generator is nothing but an integrated or a small, very small combustion chamber. So in that, some amount of fuel and some amount of oxidizer is burnt. That produces a very hot gas. That hot gas is supposed to pass through a hot gas turbine. So when hot gas hits the turbine rotates. The turbine uh, rotation is converted into the reciprocating motion by means of the turbo assembly. We do have a gear case that will control the movement of the pumps. Now, you do have individual pumps for both fuel separately and oxidizer separately. Once the pump starts, it will pull the oxidizer and fuel separately, and it will give the pressurization. The amount of fuel and oxidizer can be controlled by means of the individual valves. The additional thing is that the exhaust from the turbine is also utilized for heat exchanging, that can be used for furthermore pressurization. And also, still, if the exhaust of that particular turbine can be used as a small exhaust nozzle. Now that is also used for some thrust vector control or additional boosted thrust also. So this is the most we can say the most convenient and most widely used type of propellant feed system. Almost most of the aircraft, means or rockets today uses this type only. The advantage is that you do have uniform and continuous pressurization. Disadvantage may be the complexity of the design, but still it is very, very useful for long range applications and most powerful applications. Right, with that, we'll complete the liquid propellant rockets, and because this is actually not a separate subject of we can say the aerospace in rocket propulsion. This is just a fundamental subject, so we don't need to go much about that. Now we'll go to the hybrid rockets, which is actually a part of uh, this particular topic. Hybrid rockets. There are the third type of rocket that is which uses both liquid as well as solid. For example, either one can be solid and other can be liquid. So we saw solid propellant rockets in previous lecture and liquid propellant rockets before this particular topic. So hybrid rockets are actually the combination of both. Now, why they do is because both liquid propellant rocket and solid propellant rocket have advantages as well as disadvantages. Now, hybrid rockets can exhibit the advantages of both, eliminating the disadvantages they have. Because, of course, you do have practical limitations. I'll tell you at that at the point of time. I will tell you. But here, these hybrid rockets can be controlled, unlike a solid rockets. We all know solid rockets can be controlled, very tough to control. So here, hybrid rockets, like a solid liquid rocket, it can be controlled and can be shut down easily and can be throttable. Throttable means we can control the amount of the thrust produced. Okay. Now, generally, it was. We'll see the small history about that. It was started in the research was started in 1933 by Soviet. Of course, in 1934, the rocket reached 1,500 meters and it gave 500 Newton. And in 37, 39, Germans have developed it. And 47, we do have Pacific Rocket Society, which got very significant advantages in that. And most prolific advantage is that, improvement is that General Electric have made this. General Electric G, that company have tried it and they only got success. Now, 1995, NASA and DARPA, and now we have hybrid rocket propulsion demonstration program, that is HDVB, HPDP. Now that is a section of NASA. So they have designed it and they built it and tested it. So they only got success there. And of course, they used the HTVB, that is primary fuel factor in hybrid rockets. So what is the advantages compared to that, to a liquid rocket? Even though we do have like hybrid rocket the methodology, well, still we use liquid propellant rocket only. But still, what are the mechanical? What are the advantages of liquid rockets, hybrid rockets compared to liquid rockets? Mechanically, it is simpler. We don't have to use a separate, we can say, pumps or something. Then, of course, we can use solid fuel, which can be very high density, so it is very compact. And we can use metal additives also to increase the rate of combustion. Now, of course, compared to solid rockets, we do have many advantages. We can safely say that the solid rockets, the maximum highest basic impulse is 350, but here we can get up to, sorry, 250, but here we can get from 275 to 350. And we do have less explosion hazard. It is more controllable. It is throttable. It is safe and non-toxic, unlike a solid propellant rocket, and it can be transported easily. Right. Uh, of course, this is what the technical comparison. Now, what are types? Normally, you have two types of hybrid rockets. That is direct hybrid and reverse hybrid. Direct hybrid is what practically we can think of. Direct hybrid is something which is practically in use, I think. So direct hybrid means the oxidizer will be in the form of liquid and fuel is in the form of solid. Whereas reverse hybrid is very complex, literally not in use. In that, oxidizer is in the form of solid and fuel is in the form of liquid. So that is literally a very tough thing. Now we can see the direct, or we can say the conventional hybrid rocket. Here we do have a gas pressurization system to pressurize the oxidizer to move it to the chamber. You do have control valve. Control valve controls the amount of oxidizer and the pressure at which it should flow into the igniter, into the chamber. We do have igniter, which will ignite the oxidizer. and solid fuel, nothing but the grain. So both will get mixed and burnt quickly, and we do have a nozzle which will produce the expansion, which will be responsible for expansion. So it's the simplest form of hybrid rocket. Of course, we do have combustion chamber containing a solid propellant, as well as the pressure vessel, or we can say tank, consisting of liquid propellant. When thruster is desired, when the of course suitable ignition source is required to have a high level of combustion, because if it is liquid, it will catch fire easily. But here we use solid as well as liquid, so it will take some time to get burnt. So, of course, liquid propellant flows into the combustion chamber where it will get vaporized and then reacted to the solid propellant. Now, the combustion occurs in the boundary layer diffusion flame adjacent to the um, right solid propellant. So that is the point here. Now, combustion is the biggest worry here. Why this liquid propellant, why these hybrid rockets are simply limited, because you take the surface of the propellant, solid propellant, and you take a liquid propellant. Now, liquid and liquid will easily mix and burn, but liquid and solid, when it is burnt, it will take some time to get mixed and burnt. That is the biggest worry with the hybrid rockets. You do have delayed combustion. That delayed combustion will produce huge amount of problems. Now, not only that, with respect to time, you can see the grain. At the center, you don't have much solid fuel. So the liquid oxidizer will escape as like a liquid oxidizer. So with respect to time, the performance of the hybrid rockets are limited. They will drop. There are two big disadvantages with hybrid rockets. First one, the mixing and burning of solid rockets, solid fuel and liquid oxidizer instantly, it is very tough. Second one, with respect to time, there will be a big gap, or we can say the bore diameter will be very high. So the oxidizer will escape into the solid fuel easily, and it will remain uncombusted. That will affect the complete process. So these are the big letdowns of hybrid rockets. That's why hybrid rockets are not in use in a highly significant manner. So with that, we have discussed liquid propellant rockets, types of liquid propellant rockets, and the types of feed systems. We also have discussed the hybrid rockets and the basic construction of hybrid rockets, and the advantages and the limitations of the hybrid rockets. So next session, we'll discuss some other topic in detail. Thank you.